Welcome to the New Creations for Christ. In this testimony, I'm going to share with you how my brother-in-law, more like my baby brother, went from professed atheist to being baptized on his deathbed. My brother-in-law, Nicky, I've known since birth. We're 10 years apart in age. He was always like a little brother to me. I mean, would follow me around, would want to do things. Even when my wife and I were first married, Nicky lived with us for a while. Just an awesome young little guy. Took him golfing, swimming. Just had a lot of fun together. Now, as we fast forward, here Nicky is. He's in his 40s, young 40s, maybe just 40. Nicky just turned about 40. And he's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. I remember going to the hospital after he came out of intensive care, and I'm sitting there in the room with him. You know, after some conversations, he said, "Jules, will you get me a Bible?" And I was shocked. I was like, what is going on in this guy's head? But I was joyful beyond imagination. And I said, "Nicky, I'm getting up right now." He goes, "No, don't leave. You won't come back." I said, "Nicky, I'm coming back." I said, "Unless I die on the way or the way back, I'm coming back to bring you this Bible." He said, "You promise?" I said, "I promise." So I go to the Christian store, and I grab a Bible, bring it back to him, and we just talked. Now, going forward, I would meet Nicky. We'd go to lunch together. I mean, he was still pretty healthy, even though he was going through some nasty treatments. We would go to lunch, talk. It was just him and I. Or we go meet with some of his old co-workers. Slowly but surely, we started inviting others to come to this luncheon. And before you know it, we would fill up large tables of people wanting to have lunch with Nicky. You know, it's just a beautiful thing to just watch and see. Just because everyone to bring him love and support and let him know he wasn't by himself. Now, I would come by throughout the week on Fridays. You know, myself, my middle son, my nephew, we would go and play cards with him, video games, whatever he wanted to do. I just wanted to do whatever he needed to do and let him know I was there for him. You know, so we kept doing these things, kept having these lunches, kept coming over his house. I started coming over on Friday nights, bringing him and his wife and his stepson, you know, meals, just hanging out. Now, my two older boys both told me one day, they said, "Dad, whatever you're doing with Uncle Nick as it relates to God, keep doing it because he will not let us say a word to him about God." And I said, "Okay." You know, and I just took that as this was my thing to do, besides just loving him, bring him the word of God. One day I'm driving from my son's Special Olympic baseball game. I'm driving, Nicky calls me. He goes, "Hey, Jules." I said, "Hey, Nicky." I could tell something was wrong just by the tone of his voice. And I'm like, "Buddy, what's going on?" And he said, "You know, I'm not afraid to die." And I said, "Nicky, you know, if I felt different, I would tell you." I said, "But what's going on?" He gets real quiet again. And I said, "Come on, buddy, this is me. You can tell me anything." And he said, I could tell he was holding back tears, and he goes, "Jules, I'm terrified of going to hell." I got to tell you, gang, I had to pull my car over, put it in park, put my head down, and I started praying silently. "God, please guide my mouth. Guide my thoughts. Guide my words." And as soon as I stopped praying, I started laughing uncontrollably. I mean, I knew it wasn't right for me to laugh, but I couldn't help it. And he says, "Jules, did you not hear me? I told you I'm terrified, and you're laughing. He says, how can you laugh? I said, Nick, just humor me here. I said, if you're terrified of going to hell, does that imply there's a heaven? And if so, who lives there? Nicky stopped, paused for a minute, and he goes, Jules, he goes, you know I love you like a brother. And I said, same here. He goes, but you're an asshole. And I just started laughing. I said, that's fine. Just answer the damn question. Now he's starting to tear up a little bit, I could tell, and he goes, yes, there is a heaven, and God lives there. I said, praise Jesus. We're making progress, Nicky. So as we talked, and I could reassure him, and I knew he was feeling more comfortable, I said, Nicky, what do you want to do with this? Is there something I can do to help you? And he said to me, he said, Jules, do you remember the priest that baptized Robert? And Robert's my youngest son who's multi-handicapped. I said, yes, Nicky, I remember him. He said, do you think you could find him? I really liked him. So his wife, Jen, and I reached out, and Jen found him. He was like an hour away, and a couple days later, lo and behold, he comes to Nicky's house. I'm there, my middle son, Danny, and Nicky's just asking him, he goes, Father, will you baptize me? And Father Mike was like, Nicky, I just came here to talk with you. Let's just talk first. So they talked for a while, and Nicky wanted to confess his sins to him. And Father Mike was good with that. And I said, Nicky, you want Danny and I, my middle son, to leave the room? And he goes, no, please stay. He says, you've been on this journey with me, this faith journey. Stay with me, please. And I did. And Nicky sits there and he confesses his sins to Father Mike. And I listened to it all. Some of it I was aware of it, some not. Didn't matter. I was so joyful to God that he was going through this. And Father Mike said to me, he said, that's what I wanted to hear, Nick. He said, I want to make sure you have a relationship with God. Now that I hear you, he says, I'm more than willing to baptize you. So there, he baptized Nick right there in his deathbed, and I was able to witness this with the joy that you couldn't imagine. Now, let's fast forward a couple weeks, and just weeks before he passes, Nicky's laying in his deathbed, and I'm sitting there right alongside of him, and he looks at me, and he goes with the most sincere eyes. He says, Jules, do you know if I had to go through this all over again, and you know what I'm talking about, I would. Just to be where I am with my relationship with God. And I said, Nicky, do you know how profound that is? I said, I've watched you throw up 10,000 plus times. I've seen you coiled up. Your sister, my wife's taken you to a gajillion treatments. And you can say that to me. And he looked at me with the angelic face, and he says, I mean it with all my heart. I'm so grateful that I have a relationship with God. Now, brothers and sisters, he died weeks later. And I got to tell you, you could look at that and go, you know, God should have saved him. He should have saved him from that brutal death. And you know what? I'd have to agree with you. Yeah, I would have loved for God to have done that. That was even one of my prayers. God, if you can physically heal him, if you would physically heal him, I would greatly appreciate it, because I love Nicky and I know I would have missed him. But I also prayed another prayer. I wanted the spiritual healing, because that gift is a gift that lasts forever, through all of eternity. And Nicky received that gift. That's a gift I pray for all of us, right? I want no one to end up in the bowels of hell with Satan. Nobody. I pray that we're all in heaven, loving God for eternity. You know, Nicky could have been healed, but eventually he was going to die. Just like Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, Lazarus eventually died. And I know in my heart and soul that Nicky's in a good place, no longer in pain and suffering. And he's there in the presence of God. What more could I ask for? So I tell you, my brothers and sisters, there is grace in suffering. If you're going through a horrible event in your life, a divorce, a disease, a struggle, and you find it drawing you into discussions with God, into some form of a relationship with God, go with it. Talk to Him. For He wants to bring His love to you, His joy, His peace, His strength. Trust Him, my brothers and sisters, no matter what you're going through. This is my prayer for you all. Peace.
2 Corinthians 12:9-10. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in my weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. Your pain and your suffering can be a grace from God. God is a God of life, but He can take the sorrow, He can take the pain, and He can transform it for the good. He makes all things new. God is aware of your suffering. He is on the move, healing and transforming your heart, mind, and soul to be one with His. God is so loving. He's impossibly loving, beyond what we can even understand. You are the apple of God's eye. Jesus, as God on earth, wept human tears at the death of His friend Lazarus and for the grief His family and friends were enduring. He can relate to every sorrow that we've ever experienced.